Welcome to Peoria Church of the Nazarene in Peoria, Arizona. We want to share with you the sermon from this past Sunday so that you'll be able to hear it and hopefully God will speak to you through it. It's taken from the passage 1 Kings chapter 12, and it's about when Solomon's son Rehoboam became the new leader of the nation of Israel. I'm comparing that to becoming the new boss. It's almost always a difficult and trying adventure to become a new boss. Sometimes it involves moving your family to a new city, which means a new house, new schools for the kids, a new church for the family, new places to shop and eat, and even new friends. It usually means driving to a new place to work each day. And what you do every day as a boss is often very different from what you've been doing. Your new coworkers are different people than what you had before, and these new coworkers look to you as the boss. Some of them may resent you for being the boss because either they wanted your job or they wanted one of their friends to be the new boss. And you will definitely do things differently from what your employees are used to because you're a different person than their former boss. And they will have all kinds of expectations and hopes concerning how things will be done differently now that you are the boss. Well, the biggest question for the employees is, will things get better? Will things get worse? Or will they just be different? And everyone hopes they'll still be comfortable with the new leader. Even though King Solomon was the wisest king who ever lived and accomplished more than any other king of Israel, there were still problems, and the people hoped that the transition from Solomon to his son Rehoboam, that things might get better. They really wanted to support the new king, but some things were going to have to change. 1 Kings chapter 12, beginning with verse 1. Rehoboam went to Shechem, where all Israel had gathered to make him king. The leaders of Israel summoned him, and Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel went to speak with Rehoboam. And here's the problem they faced and that they hoped would change. Verse 4. Your father was a hard master, they said. Lighten the harsh labor demands and the heavy taxes that your father imposed on us. Then we will be your loyal subjects. Rehoboam replied, give me 3 days to think this over. Then come back for my answer. So the people went away. You know, every people from every nation on earth believes that their taxes are too high and their living conditions are not good enough. So when we read that these people were asking for something better, we tend not to take it very seriously. But let's look back at what taxes and working and living conditions were like under King Solomon. In his early days as a young king, Solomon quickly decided that he would build a glorious temple for God and also a couple of palaces, one for himself and one for his wives. These were all huge projects that took several years to complete. As these projects began, Solomon sent a message to the lumberyard, which happened to be Hiram, king of Tyre, in what we know today as Lebanon, north of Israel. He shared his building materials list of lumber with King Hiram, who agreed to provide the trees that Solomon's workers would need to make lumber out of. It went like this, back in 1 Kings chapter 5, beginning with verse 7. When Hiram received Solomon's message, he was very pleased and said, praise the Lord today for giving David a wise son to be the kingdom of the great nation of Israel. And he sent this message to Solomon. I have received your message, and I will supply all the cedar and cypress timber you need. My servants will bring the logs from the Lebanon mountains to the Mediterranean Sea and make them into rafts and float them along the coast to whatever place you choose. Then we will break the rafts apart so you can carry the logs away. You can pay me by supplying me with food for my household." So Hiram supplied as much cedar and cypress timber as Solomon desired. In return, Solomon sent him an annual payment of 100,000 bushels of wheat for his household, 110,000 gallons of pure olive oil. So the Lord gave wisdom to Solomon just as he had promised, and Hiram and Solomon made a formal alliance of peace. Then King Solomon conscripted, notice that word, not hired, but conscripted, a labor force of 30,000 men from all Israel. He sent them to Lebanon in shifts, 10,000 every month, so that each man would be 1 month in Lebanon, 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of the labor force. Solomon also had 70,000 common laborers, 80,000 quarry workers in the hill country, 3,600 foremen to supervise the work. At the king's command, they quarried large blocks of high-quality stone and shaped them to make the foundation of the temple. Let's add that up. 30,000 lumberjacks, 70,000 common laborers, 80,000 quarry workers, 3,600 foremen to supervise. If I added right, that comes up to a total of 183,600 people not hired for pay, but conscripted into forced labor. Now, there's something we need to understand. In order to feed their families, they had to work their own farms too. And it wasn't for a few weeks or months, but for years and years and years. Remember the logs that came from the king of Tyre? Those logs were not free. They had to be paid for. Solomon had an annual payment to the king of Tyre to pay for those logs. 100,000 bushels of wheat, 110,000 gallons of extra virgin olive oil. This payment had to be made every year that logs for building was provided for. So where did Solomon get these supplies? Farmers donated them in the form of taxes. They didn't offer, they were compelled to donate. So when Solomon's son became their king, their request makes perfect sense. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 4, "Your father was a hard master," they said. "Lighten the harsh labor demands and the heavy taxes that your father imposed on us, and then we will be your loyal subjects." There's a sense in which every new boss faces these same issues. How will the new boss treat their employees? How will the new boss restructure the working environment? Will the new boss make work much more satisfying or more bitter? King Solomon's son, King Rehoboam, had a decision to make. Would he consider the struggles of his people? Or would he keep up the high taxes and forced labor that his father had instituted? Or would he be even more demanding than his father? It came down, would he choose compassion and teamwork or harsh bullying? 1 Kings 12, verse 6. Then King Rehoboam discussed the matter with the older men who had counseled his father Solomon. "What is your advice?" he asked. "How should I answer these people?" The older counselors replied, "If you are willing to be a servant to these people today and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your loyal subjects." Verse 8, But Rehoboam rejected the advice of the older men and instead asked the opinion of the young men who had grown up with him and were now his advisors. "What is your advice?" he asked them. "How should I answer these people who want me to lighten the burdens imposed by my father?" The young men replied, "This is what you should tell those complainers who want a lighter burden. My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Yes, my father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions." So whose advice would Rehoboam choose to act on? The experienced, wise leaders who knew how to develop loyalty and a strong economy? Or the immature young men from the wealthy families who had always had everything given to them on a silver platter? For Rehoboam, it might have boiled down to, who do you want to impress? The common people or your entitled, wealthy, young, hot-headed friends? And Rehoboam chose their power-hungry, intimidating, bullying advice over the wise advice that would have established his kingdom with loyalty and love. Verse 12. 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to hear Rehoboam's decision, just as the king had ordered. But Rehoboam spoke harshly to the people, for he rejected the advice of the older counselors and followed the counsels of his younger advisors. He told the people, "My father laid heavy burdens on you, but I am going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions." Verse 15, so the king paid no attention to the people. Verse 16, when all Israel realized that the king had refused to listen to them, they responded, "Down with the dynasty of David. We have no interest in the son of Jesse. Back to your homes, O Israel. Look out for your own house, O David." So the people of Israel returned home, but Rehoboam continued to rule over the Israelites who lived in the towns of Judah. These demands of the king did not go over well. Instead of loyalty, the Israelites chose betrayal. Instead of succumbing to the intimidation, they chose treachery. Verse 18, King Rehoboam sent Adoniram, who was in charge of forced labor, to restore order. But the people of Israel stoned him to death. When this news reached King Rehoboam, he quickly jumped into his chariot and fled to Jerusalem. What do you think the historians wrote about how King Rehoboam handled his new job as king, as the new boss? Was he able to pull the nation together, inspire loyalty from the people, and boost the lifestyle of everyone in the nation? Well, verse 19 is what the historians wrote. And to this day, the northern tribes of Israel have refused to be ruled by a descendant of David. No, he did not do well as the new boss. In every nation and in every business, no matter how large or how small, every single one of them are composed of people. And each of these people were created in the image of God. Each have been programmed with specific talents and abilities. Each have feelings and emotions, and each have dreams for their future. Being a government leader is not about making your personal life as rich and as lavish as possible or building your own kingdom. A government's primary task is to build a system of life for your people that will maximize their potential and provide a safe and secure lifestyle for their families. You see, their people are the most important part of a nation. Take care of them, and they will support you. Being the boss for a business is the same. It's not about making your personal life as rich and lavish as possible, or about flaunting your power. A boss's primary task is to build a system for your people that will maximize their potential and provide a safe and secure workplace. You see, the employees are the most important part of a business. Take care of them, and they will take care of your customers and of you. One of my neighbors recently had their company bought out and a new owner was installed. The former owner was extremely employee-centered and believed that he got more from his workforce if he treated them respectfully and kindly. And his employees loved him. They loved working there, and they worked hard. The new owner was all about the bottom line, which meant that productivity needed to increase dramatically. He didn't care about the employees or their working conditions or their personal lives. He only cared about increasing profits. His method for calling for more productivity was with demeaning statements, accusations, and threats. The employees felt like they were nothing in the boss's eyes, and they wondered if he even had a heart. The result? Productivity dropped. Within a couple of months, most had found other jobs. Now, new people had to be hired and trained, and the really good place to work had gone sour. If you want to know how to destroy people, follow Rehoboam's advice. Verses 10 and 11, the young men replied, "This is what you should tell those complainers who want a lighter burden. My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Yes, my father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions." Let me paraphrase that into something we might relate to today. Deny the reality of their complaints. Don't listen or care about their hurts and frustrations. Instead, accuse them of being complainers. Demand more from them. Threaten them. Make their lives miserable. When I was in my early 20s, I went to work for the telephone company as a service representative. I worked in a second-floor office of a high-rise office building in downtown Boise, Idaho. I thought I had arrived. My job was to use the telephone to take orders for service, to collect overdue bills, and to take general complaints. I liked my job, and I was very good at it. But the management used these destructive tools in an attempt to get more work out of us. I was constantly told that my work volume was at a non-acceptable level, and I was put on probation because of it. At the end of the month, I asked my supervisor what my work volume number was and was told that it was barely acceptable. But I wanted to know the exact number. And the boss, with great embarrassment, gave me the number. My work volume was 1 point away from the highest bracket there was. And my sales for the month put me in the top group of the service representatives in that large office. I felt like I was being bullied in an attempt to get more work out of one of their best employees, and I resented it. When another job offer came along, I jumped at the chance to change jobs. When I gave my 2 weeks' notice, the bosses got off my case, and I enjoyed those last 2 weeks more than any other time that I had worked there. What a difference the philosophy of the boss can make in a company. The other side, what did the wise counselors suggest Rehoboam do as the new job as boss of the country? First, be a servant. Verse 7, the old counselors replied, "If you're willing to be a servant to these people today and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your loyal subjects." For a government leader like a king, being a servant means giving priority to the people. listening to them, finding out what is keeping them from thriving in life, providing them with the opportunities that will enable them to do the things that match their abilities and talents. Help them be successful and achieve at least some of their dreams. When people know that you want the best for them and for them to be successful in life, they'll be supportive of you as a government leader. Being a servant as a boss in a company means giving priority to the employees, putting them in a position that makes best use of their abilities and talents, providing them with the training and supplies to do their job, and helping them to be successful at work. When employees know that you want the best for them as people and for them to be successful in their work, they tend to work their hearts out for you. A second thing Rehoboam's wise counselors suggested was to have compassion. Back to verse 7 again. The older counselors replied, "If you're willing to be a servant to these people today and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your loyal subjects." If you're willing to give them a favorable answer, what might that mean? Listen and care about their hurts and frustrations. Acknowledge the validity of their complaints. Affirm them as people who are very valuable. Admit that they've helped the nation to become the amazing, wonderful nation that it is. Thank them for their work and sacrifice. Help them to feel valuable and important. And let them know that you will work hard for them and your families and that they are important to you. You see, compassion is the opposite of being a bully. God is our role model for being compassionate. Psalm 103, "The Lord is like a father to his children, tender and compassionate to those who fear him. For he knows how weak we are. He remembers we are only dust." That last phrase, he remembers that we are only dust. The compassionate boss doesn't beat us up when we make a mistake, but helps us to make it right and to learn from it. Nehemiah chapter 9, "You are a forgiving God, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in love." Jeremiah said in Lamentation chapter 3, "Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness." Because of the boss's compassion, we are not fired or miserable at our work. Instead, the boss helps us become the very best we can be. When Moses was on Mount Sinai receiving the 10 Commandments and the Levitical law, God passed in front of Moses. And when he did, he also spoke to Moses, declaring what he is like. God described himself as the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. Becoming the new boss is almost always a difficult and trying adventure. When you have this opportunity, choose to follow the advice of the wise counselors. Be a servant and have compassion. Now, for most of us, we'll never be the boss, but this still applies to us in our families and our groups and even at church. Be a servant. Have compassion. Now, for all of those who are listening today, God is our ultimate boss. And he does all the things that a good boss does. He listens and cares about our hurts and frustrations. He acknowledges the validity of our struggles and our complaints. He affirms us as people who are very valuable. He recognizes that we have helped this local church to become the amazing, wonderful local church that it is. He thanks us for our sacrifice and our hard work. He helps us to feel valuable and important. He also lets us know that He will work hard for us and for our families, that we are important to Him. Our benediction for today comes from Hebrews chapter 13, where it says, "Now may the God of peace equip you with everything good for doing His will, and may He work in us what is pleasing to Him through Jesus Christ, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen."